Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul Aviva Premiership 2016-2017 season review. I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul, and what I plan to do is to run through the table top to bottom, giving a quick overview as to how I see the team went, and also give them a grade, A, B, C or D, depending on how they did this season. So, if we just remind, first off, obviously, if you're watching this live, please feel free to put comments below and your thoughts as to how teams did during the season. If you're watching the recording, then again, put comments below. I'm always up for a good rugby chat. So the season finished off with Wasps top of the table on 84 points, having won 17 games and just lost the 4. They led the way on points 4 with 693 points, but gave up just over 500 points in return, which, if you look at someone like Northampton Saints, they only gave up 490 points and they ended up down in 7th. So it's they were definitely much more of the attacking side rather than the defending side. Coming into this season, I thought, because they had so many new names and had lost some key players in players like Pia Tau and George Smith, I thought they were going to struggle this season and perhaps finish outside of the playoffs. How wrong was I? They stormed the season, always looking like good top, and just got reeled in towards the end by Exeter. Then they made it all the way through to the final, where they missed out. And considering they haven't been there for a long time, that wasn't really too surprising. So I think they deserve an A grade for the season. Now, again, they're losing some key players, in players like Beale, who's heading back to Australia in the off-season. So we'll see how they pick up next season with replacements for them. Also, yes, obviously Cipriani, I've heard, is heading over to France. So again, they're losing some key players who have been their stalwarts this season. But still, I think an A grade and looking good going into next season. Exeter Chiefs finished second in the table. They started off the season poorly with a few run of losses, but finished the season extremely strongly with a record run of winning games with try bonus points. They obviously then went on to beat Saracens in the semi-finals and Wasps in the final to win their first ever Premiership trophy, and to do it 7 years after getting promoted. It was all when Exeter Chiefs got promoted. They always said they had a plan to be one of the largest the largest European. So I think it was one of the largest from the top 3 European sides in rugby, and obviously a lot of people laughed at that when they first came up, but they are certainly heading that way with their stadium redevelopment that's happening off the pitch, and then on the pitch having won the Premiership title. I should just rewind and talk about Wasps on their European Rugby Champions Cup side. On that side, they made it through the group stages and then lost out to Leinster in the quarter-finals, which with only 2 sides went through there, where Wasps and Saracens. Very different to the domination that we saw last season of English and French sides going through. The Irish sides did very well this year. And so Wasps will be slightly disappointed with their European Champions Cup, having made it to the quarter-finals. Exeter really stumbled in that competition, and part of their poor start of the season played into that, and they didn't get out of their group stages. So they'll be looking at improving on the European side next year. But having got having got the Aviva Premiership Championship, you've got to say it's an A grade for Exeter as they build on success after success over their 7 years. I mean, I've got my Exeter rugby shirt on today, so clearly that's the club that I support. But over the 7 years, there's only really been 1 year where they took a step backwards. Every other year, they've been stepping forward and improving. So last year they made the final and lost. This year they made the final and won. Both years finishing second and getting home semi-finals. So I say A grade for Exeter, a very good building block. Saracens, in some ways, Saracens ended up third. Had a bit of a stumble during the Six Nations, but were dominant in Europe, going on to win the European Rugby Champions Cup for the second year running. Last year they did the double. This year they got just one cup. If you can say just one cup. And the way they celebrated after the European Champions Cup win, and how they took their entire squad, including academy, up to that game, you got a feeling that that was their big target of the season, more so than the Aviva Premiership, and that maybe they trying to build themselves back up after winning that competition was a step too far for them when they got missing out to Exeter in that semi-final. It's not to take anything away from Exeter. Exeter were deserved champions, but you can see that perhaps Saracens had their eyes on another prize, and that was their key thing. So again, having picked up that, being champions of Europe, clearly they have to get an A grade there, backing up on last season. Again, looking at the off-season, perhaps a bit more turnover than they normally have, but they'll be building on to next season and should again be a key side. Now, I've just gone through the top 3 teams and given them all A grades, because I think they've all achieved what they kind of set out to, or have definitely done well this season. But it has been a strange old season, the Aviva Premiership, where basically the top 3 have been competitive, and then pretty much everyone below that, to a greater or lesser degree, have underperformed. Apart from some of the bottom teams which we'll get onto later. But the general, that middle pack hasn't pushed on and challenged in the same way as it had last season, or the last 2 or 3 seasons. I mean, Exeter missed out on the playoffs 2 seasons ago, just on gone blank points difference, and it was much more competitive this season. There was quite a big gap from that top 3. It was 11 points down to 4th place. There's a further 7 points down to 5th place, and another big 7 points down to 6th place. So it kind of was a bit of a drop off the cliff there. So in 4th place we had Leicester Tigers, 11 points behind Saracens on 66 points with 14 wins and 8 losses. And to say that this was considered like a poor season for them and they made the playoffs gives you an idea as to the expectations that Tigers have on themselves, and also and some of the off-field issues that they had that the players managed to overcome. They went through 3 different directors of rugby this season, with Cockerell and Mauger both going, and he's a player, Matt O'Connor coming in to finish off the season. He'll be there for next season, presumably. So it really has been a season of turmoil for Leicester Tigers. And lots of fans not happy with how the club was being run on that side to a certain degree. And again, they failed. They also didn't get out of their group stage in Europe. So even though they have made the playoffs, I think this probably was a C grade for them. A, because of their expectations, and B, because of the turmoil and mess that happened off the pitch amongst their coaching staff there. Next up came Bath in 5th with 59 points. With pre-season expectations, I didn't think they were going to do this well. Having a new coach coming in means you quite often struggle to get his structures in place, and it takes time to learn new systems. Especially when it's a Super Rugby coach who's coming in, because he doesn't generally take part in pre-season as he's tied up with other commitments and arrives late, so it can quite often take a long time for him to get in. Blackadder landed and had a great honeymoon period where Bath really did overperform, and it looked for a long time like they were heading towards the playoffs. Injuries towards the end of the season didn't help them, and they slipped back. Also, again, they seem to always have off-field issues. This season, it was around Ford and his transfer saga, and whether he would stay or not. And in the end, he is off to Tigers next season, with Burns heading in the other direction. So, in some ways, you've got to say that Bath exceeded their pre-season expectations, but they did fade, and at one point were looking to do much better. So it's probably a B grade there, with Blackadder settling in very well at Bath, and you'd expect them to kick on better next season. Injuries depending, and also how well Burns settles into that key number 10 role. Behind them came Harlequins in 6th place, taking the last automatic Rugby Champions Cup spot. And that's an improvement for them over the last couple of seasons. They really had faded and slipped away from when they won the whole thing a few years back, and with obviously having a new coach in place, even though he was had been promoted internally, could also have taken some time to get running this season. And they became, in some ways, the sale of the season, winning just about all of their home games and losing just about all their away ones. And they ended up with an 11 wins and 11 losses record. From memory, I think it was 10 home wins and 1 away win, and 10 away losses and 1 away loss, ending up with a points difference of 6. So a very sort of Jekyll and Hyde kind of season. And as I say, something like Sale did last season to get themselves into the top 6. It's very unlike Harlequins, really. But again, we still saw they have their key reliance on their England players, and when they are missing those, they do lose a lot of leadership. With Nick Evans' retirement at the end of the season, so replacing him is going to be a key factor for next year. And I would say it was probably a par performance for them to come in 6th. It definitely looked like they were going to do worse than that at some points of the season, especially with that really, really poor away record. So probably a B in the end, I think, is what Harlequins get from that, having a new head coach or a new director of rugby, whatever you want to call them, a new guy in charge anyway, taking over from Conor O'Shea, and then to end up there. Clearly they need to up their away game going forwards. Saints ended up in 7th on 52 points, and through the convoluted European playoff system have earned themselves a spot in the Rugby Championship next year at the expense of Stade Francais, who won the Rugby Challenge Cup this year. So they, even though they came 7th, they are going to get themselves in that top European competition. I personally had Saints down as being a top 4 team this season with the signing of Lewis Pickamoles, but in the end they only won 10 games and lost 12, and actually all the teams from now on will have negative points difference in the bottom half of the table, as you'd expect. And so I really do think they have failed this season. There's been a lot of pressure off the pitch to look at getting a new director of rugby, but that's not really Saints' style, and they have stuck with their man, and he looks like he's going to be there again next season. You do kind of feel like he's been there a bit too long now, and they need some fresh blood. But let's see if he can turn it around next year. But as I say, so they've finished off in 7th. They managed to get that European Rugby Championship slot, but you've got to really say this was probably a C-grade season for them. In 8th, Newcastle Falcons had a fantastic season. I was sort of saying early on, how the top 3 were doing well and everyone else sort of suffered. Well, sorry, there are a couple of exceptions to that. One of those is Newcastle Falcons. Personally, I had them down to be relegated this season, and yet here they are, sitting in 8th on 49 points, a good 29 points clear of relegation in comfort. And they spent the whole season in comfort, looking more up the table than down the table, and popping into the top 6 on occasions as well. Dean Richards has done a fantastic job up there, and with the number of players that actually they had turned over. So a definite A grade for Newcastle Falcons, who, I say, got themselves clear of relegation early and stayed that way. Next season, with Irish coming up, they're going to be wanting to kick on rather than regress, but we'll have to see, because again, I think they've got quite a large turnover up in Newcastle. Gloucester finished in 9th. It's another disappointing season for Gloucester, and they parted ways with their head coach and had the Lions, as in the Golden Lions of South Africa, Super Rugby side head coach coming in to replace him, Dan Ackerman. So it's going to be their experiment over the last 3 years. Really hasn't worked out, but at least they stuck with one guy and gave him a chance, and hopefully they give the same to Ackerman. But definitely a C season for Gloucester. They made it through to the Challenge Cup final and losing out to Stad. They seem to always do well in that competition, but really were not where they wanted to be in the Aviva Premiership. Never really challenging for that top half of the table, but never really looking like going down. Sort of just treading water yet again for another season. Sale Sharks in 10th. Now, the last season they finished 6th, and there was real hope that they would push on. The demands of European Champions Cup rugby seems to have taken its toll. It's something they seem to do. They seem to yo-yo between either just making that top 6 and then having a poor season the following season. So next season, back them for top 6 when they don't have the distractions of European Rugby Champions Cup. So, yeah, definitely a C grade for Sale Sharks as well. As I say, finishing 6th last season, they were looking at pushing on. And again, another side that didn't ever look like getting relegated. Well, actually, they did it sometimes, but kept their noses or their heads above water. But a poor season for Sale Sharks. They did improve their away form, but their home form suffered as well, leading to only 7 wins and 14 losses. One draw in there. Worcester Warriors are again another side that picks up all their points pretty much at home and rarely gets the away wins. They will be happy that they have avoided relegation, but they know that next season will be tough again. They are extremely reliant on 1 or 2 players, particularly Hugard at fly half and TO as well. And so when they lose those players to internationals or injuries, they really do suffer and struggle. They need to build much more depth there at Worcester. I would perhaps go for, I'm not sure whether you call it, perhaps a B season because of those injuries, but they really were scrapping it out with Bristol for that relegation spot most of the season, and they won't be happy. That's not where they really want to be. Well, actually, anybody wants to be, obviously. That leaves us with Bristol, who you've got to say had probably a D season. Came up with Andy Robinson, never really got themselves going. Got rid of him relatively early in the season. Had a bit of an improvement, having picked up 3 wins overall out of their 22 games, and then got themselves another director of rugby coming in later in the season as well. Now, with Pat Lamb coming next season, they've got a quality coach coming in, and they can look to be positive. There's a positive outlook for them. They do have the cash, the players, and the coach now to push on. Everyone's expecting them to get promoted again last season. But this really was not, after knocking at the door for so many years and finally getting promotion, spending so much money, this was a poor showing by them. And they were really looking to, this was supposed to be the year where we really had a good team going down and a battle to the end. And unfortunately that didn't happen. Bristol just didn't put that together. And so I think it was pretty much, probably a D season considering the amount of money that was spent. So that's my review as to how the season went. Clearly it was a record-breaking season in a number of ways. I believe attendances were up. Exeter put in that long run of tri-bonus point wins and also won the championship for the very first time, or the title for the very first time. It has been a fantastic season and looking forward to the next season too. Let's hope that we can get, rather than having 3 teams at the top and everyone else, let's hope we can get another 3 teams to scrap it out and have that sort of top 6 all fighting out for those playoff spots next season. Thank you very much for joining me. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. It is in the link above on Twitter, down below on YouTube. And I'm really looking forward to the Lions this weekend. Check out my YouTube for my video of the Lions as they come through immigration, and also my preview of the tour, this game this weekend between the Provincial Barbarians and the Lions, and also the weather watch for this weekend because it is looking wet. Enjoy whatever you're watching, and catch you later.